Just gotta tell me it records and I can start. This meeting is
Recording.
recorded. Okay, it is 6:04. And I'm gonna call to order this meeting of the Danville School Building Advisory Committee. This is a committee of the Danville School Board. We have a quorum of the school board here. One of us is remote. We need to introduce ourselves around the room. The building is being recorded. The meeting is being recorded. I'm Clayton Cargo, the board chair. We're gonna go around this room first, and I'll call your name on Zoom and you can announce yourself out. Sitting next to me this way is
Eric Hewlett, board member.
Brandon Lawrence, Facilities Director.
Go ahead.
Cam Featherston Hart, Truex Collins.
Sarah Welch, elementary principal.
Rob Belvey.
Mary Beatty.
Katie White.
Molly Gleason, clerk.
Lance Horn.
And then Mark
Mark Tucker, Superintendent.
and Tim
Tim Sanborn, board member.
and Natalie.
Natalie Conway, secondary principal.
Thank you all for coming. We're here to discuss tonight, before I go on, I guess, are there any additions or changes to the agenda? And before we get started, is there any public input?
We still don't have anybody public on Zoom.
Nobody on Zoom, no public input. I moved it up, no additions or changes. So we're here tonight to discuss with Truex Collins and Camp Featherston specifically a review of the detailed cost estimate sheets that have been being worked up based on some of the work we've done in this committee and some of the work that's being done with administration based on some of that work. And I'm going to start by turning the floor over to Cam because he's got some details for us.
Great. So can I have power to share? Whoever's hosting?
You know how to do that, Sarah?
I do.
I don't.
But I don't have.
Wait, am I the host? Am I the only host?
I think
No, settings, more.
the little three dots in the corner of this.
Okay, the 3 dots in the corner of your
Oh, she
name.
just came over.
I'm gonna make you a co-host. Okay.
Brandon, are you officially on the committee?
It's
tied in on the
committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you've taken over that seat left vacant.
So here we go. All right. So this is a 2024 update on the capital project. So I wanted to start with just a very, very brief review. What have we done to get to this point? Okay, in 2019, there was a facility evaluation report done. This is pre-COVID. That was based on facility needs without educational alignment or additions. And it had originally 3 levels of priority: health, safety, welfare, code issues, end of usable life would be tier 2, and everything not covered under those first 2 tiers would be the 3rd priority.
Oh, it's been around.
So we did that work. We also went through an exercise that was about visioning and programming. What we wanted to do was find out what's the educational program in the school, what spaces are needed, how big do they need to be, how many of them, and also how should they be organized. So we did this work back in 2021. At the time, those findings said that the school would benefit from a significant addition, a large addition, and it included things like a second gym, a full-size auditorium, additional classrooms, etc. So that's where we were in 2021. Later in 2021, we developed a concept plan based on that. What you're looking at is a plan of the Danville School, and with in addition, a significant addition to the south, which is left on the page, where the playing fields are now. Baseball time stuff. We did cost estimating in the fall of 2021, and it came in at 71.2 million. That was a lot of money. So we started saying, well, what else can we do? Are there any options to reduce the cost? So we looked.
Hey, Cam?
Yep.
Have you advanced beyond your cover slide?
Yes.
It's not updating on the share. It's not updating on my share.
It's not on here, no.
One moment.
In the meantime, everybody, Dave Toll's joined us on the phone. Dave, say hello. Sure he's on his way over. That's Dave.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Thanks, Dave.
Let's see if it works this time.
It moved on mine. Did it move on yours, Mark?
Okay, yeah, it's moving now.
Okay, so we did the facility evaluation. We went through a visioning and programming exercise where we generated the building program and organizational diagrams. We got all the way to a concept plan level and had cost estimating work done. The high cost of this project caused us to search for some other options, including some changes that we thought would lower the cost, which was a different plan with a much smaller addition. And then we also looked at this idea of a new school, which when we asked the cost estimator, they said it was probably in between 70 and $80 million, which was about the cost of renovating the existing building and building a significant addition. So there was, at that point, my interpretation of at least the people who were in the room at the time, was that we wanted to try and pursue a new build. But there was a lot of difficulty in sort of moving past that hump. It seemed like it was too much money. I think the tax implication was very scary. So after that happened, we looked at these three options, and the project was on hold pending community discussions. So that's about 2 years ago or so. So the question was posed to us how to move forward. So in convening a smaller group to kind of triage the issue, said, what are the most pressing needs? How can we create options for moving forward at a lower cost? And the answer is that we really need to reevaluate the space needs program and the facility evaluation that were done before the design work started, because those are the foundational documents for creating a design. And when you have a limited budget, it means that you have a limited scope, or you have to build or renovate less area, which could mean no addition. So we did 3 options. You don't have to be able to read these, I promise. Each one of these is one spreadsheet, but it's printed out on 4 pieces of paper so that you can read it. And page 4, I mean, there's interesting information on all these pages. But page 4 is kind of the roll-up summary that contains the total assumed cost. In addition to all the other project costs that would be needed.
If I can interject for 1 sec, Kim.
Sure.
What we asked for originally from Truex, and it was based on the discussions we had in this committee, was we asked for what was the least amount that we could do, the least amount we could present, a $10 million option, a $20 million option, and a priority option. When we looked at these things in the smaller group, the $10 million option and the least we can do were very, very, very similar. They were within about $600,000. And so it didn't make any sense to show you the least that we could do, because it only had one thing taken off of this, which Ken will tell us what that was. I think
it was the service entrance gear, but it's debatable whether or not that's really a health, safety, welfare issue, because that's one of the locations of PCBs in the building, so it's gonna have to get fixed at some point anyway. So that's a cost that the district would bear. So
in that we were advancing what the committee had wanted us to talk about with Truex Collins, and what we advanced was this, and we ended up with at least being this one that we're gonna look at first.
So I'm actually gonna use this opportunity to pass out this one as well. You can keep it separate. It looks very similar, but it does note at the top that this is the $20 million option. And what we've done here is you can notice that in the $10 million option, only the column underneath where it says 10 million in the middle has check marks in it. In the $20 million option, we've added check marks to the column marked 20 million in order to move it out of the not selected column. If it's not selected, it doesn't total at the bottom. The last one I'll show you. This, and for those who are online, I promise I'll be right with you. So, and we will make these documents available, Clayton, so that you have them. Because the full version is not in the presentation, but for those who are following along online, what this looks like is in the $10 million option. Here's an excerpt from it. You can see that there are line items with the items that were identified in the facility evaluation. Some of those things have been taken care of. There are some lines that are now marked not used and no money associated with them. Other things have been moved to not selected pending their being addressed or being dealt with in a different way, which we'll talk about another at some point. For those following along online, if I switch to the $20 million version, you'll see that now there are check marks that have moved from not selected into the $20 million column in the middle, and the same for the high priority. So a bit of an explanation about these. The $10 million option is called $10 million option because these are budget driven, right? There are two ways to put a project together. One is based on the needs as we understand them, and then that's kind of a bottom up approach where you're trying to deal with all the items that you need to deal with. The other way to build a project is from the top down, which is a budget driven approach, which says, I only have this much money to spend. What should I do? Now, it's really up to the district what they do, but in terms of us trying to provide counsel and feedback on what's important, we would suggest that all of the health, safety, and welfare issues and code issues that have to be dealt with that were addressed in the facility evaluation are almost $10 million. And you get pretty close to the $10 million threshold when you add in the service entrance gear, which is the electrical switch gear for the building, which is one of the items that have been flagged for PCBs. So that was a natural kind of stopping point. And those things can mostly be dealt with without impacting other areas of the building. When you work on buildings, however, there are some things that, for instance, it's hard to replace ductwork and not destroy the ceilings. And it's hard to take down ceilings and not destroy lighting. And there's a kind of a cascade effect when you are working on buildings that kind of the deeper you go, the more infrastructure you deal with, the more other things are impacted by that work because they're just in the way or they won't survive the construction process. Floors are a good example. You can spend almost as much trying to protect the floor during a construction project as you would spend replacing the floor. And damage is not guaranteed to not happen. I mean, or it's an argument down the road with somebody who was trying their best but couldn't do it. So the $20 million option, when we start to deal with some of the items in the $20 million option, and I'll back up for people online to illustrate this, you can see that we've moved over now the power distribution network along with all the electrical power feeds and the electrical power demolition, because those things are all going to go together. Same thing with the fire alarm system, because fire alarm systems are often installed and maintained by electrical contractors who hire people, specialists to work under their contract. It makes sense to bundle those together. Plus, it's all wiring. We also included the heating and ventilating controls and the ventilation system because those are high needs. I'm talking about the $20 million option here, which is on the screen, as well as doing a significant number of the plumbing renovations that were needed, but not all of them. And we could keep going down the list, but for the purposes of this meeting, I'm not gonna do an exhaustive review right now of every item. This is just an explanation of how this sort of technique is used. How did we come up with 20 million or the high priority option? You know, when you get to the option that's listed as high priority, I think it's framed that way because these are kind of the needs that are going to cross the threshold. You know, if you were to have a bond vote in Danville and deal with a bunch of stuff, you know, these are the things that I don't think are gonna last another 20 years. And you can see when you look at the high priority items, we're moving over things like, you know, complete replacement of lighting fixtures and controls, the emergency lighting system, access control systems, security systems, and a lockdown system. The data network and telephone PA system, those things are things that would not survive the removal of the ceiling. It's the same with the lighting. So those kind of scoop up all of the other needs that really should be addressed in a large bonded project, just for efficiency's sake. As well as all the other various little dribs and drabs, and if you go down through the list, you know, a dialogue can be had about what's in and what's out, and we will stay on to council which things we think should be bundled.
And just a note, it added the classroom edition for the space needs.
Yes, so because the high priority item attempts to, and thank you for the segue into my next series of slides. No, that's great. I've included the roll up so that people can see, because what we've done here is we've taken the 2019 facility evaluation work, which was last estimated in 2021, and we've added cost escalation factors, both based on what the experts are telling us about the future and what local large CMs, construction managers, are telling us they have seen since then. So this is in essence our best guess. We don't prefer to work on guesses, but sketching out the bones of the options so that people can understand that for somewhere near $10 million, we think we can address the health, safety, welfare issues. For somewhere around 20 million, we think we can address the health, safety, welfare, and a few other pertinent infrastructure issues that are really dire. And then for around 45 million, we believe that we can add the most desperate spaces that are needed for the existing programs, in addition to dealing with all the other issues that are facing the school, and really kind of set the school on a trajectory to be in good shape for the next 20 plus years. And kind of start from a clean slate. That's what the $45 million option represents. It's so someone mentioned the addition. This is kind of, it only shows up in this $45 million option, because if you're spending 10 or 20, if you're only spending 10 or 20, you don't have enough money for additional space. It's too expensive. And there are too many existing issues in the building that you have. That's just my opinion, by the way. Other people can have their own opinion, and that's totally fine. So how did we know that that was the right size building? Does this address the space needs? So our last handout, and for those online, this one it's only 5 pages, and I have included it in the presentation. But we're not going to go through it exhaustively, but just so people can see what we've done. Oh, you have, okay, you have one. Yes, it should be the same. Okay. So this is the space needs program from 2021. But we have made some pretty significant changes. So folks who are following along online or in person know what we've done is we've shown here in columns what the current square footage is of each space in this building, what the growth was proposed in 2021, because we proposed that, for instance, small elementary classrooms be made into normal sized elementary. There's some very small elementary classrooms in the school, are smaller than most schools. We proposed that they be enlarged for 21st century educational standards. For the purposes of this document, if we've added columns for proposed net square footage in 2024. And a column for proposed growth in 2024, so we can compare what was proposed in 2021 with what's being proposed today. I met with Sarah and Natalie, the principals, and we went through this pretty much line by line, and we talked about all of the program needs. And I think trimmed the sails pretty considerably, and there are some compromises there, which at some point, Sarah, I hope you have an opportunity to talk about. But the net effect is that you can see here, we were proposing some additional administrative space in 2021. Now there's no additional administrative space proposed. In the elementary school, we were proposing about an additional 11,000 square feet. There is still growth proposed for the elementary school because we believe we really should have full-size classrooms to meet 21st century educational needs. That's a must-have. And so there is some growth. If you see cells that are highlighted, it means that they're changed from 2021. In the middle school, only minor changes. These are really for additional special ed, special services spaces for delivery, so that people can do coaching, have acoustic privacy, and have confidentiality that's required, etc. Only reductions proposed are back to the original size for all the community spaces, including performing arts. Design tech's not really community space, but it's in that group for some reason here. And then this community is continues. Reductions back to basically existing space only for athletics and food service. And then in support spaces, we've added one life skills classroom, which was really kind of a must-have. And again, that's one of those sort of special services program needs that just doesn't exist right now. But that's a pretty modest add. So the highlights are that the building program has been revised. We've reduced the number of total classrooms. There is one new pre-K classroom shown in this program, but overall the number of classrooms is proposed to be smaller than the previous project. We've reduced the number of additional special ed spaces, although there are some new ones. There's no second gym. And in the auditorium, we're only talking about safety and accessibility revisions. So the summary is that the space program growth in 2021 was 42,500 square feet. It was just over half of the building again, so the building would have grown by 50%. Today, we're proposing with all these cuts that there's really a space deficit of closer to 9,000 square feet. Some of the reasons for the difference in the numbers. Again, no second gym, no full-size auditorium, no team gathering spaces. Essentially, what works out to 1.5 elementary classrooms per grade, assuming mixing of grades, instead of 2 classrooms per grade with single grades. Assumption of no student population growth, and minimal additional space for special education services. That's how we were able to shave 80% out of the additions. which does result in a pretty significant savings to the project overall. We've trimmed essentially the same conceptual project from 72 million to around 45, with options to do less. Some of the next steps would be understanding the tax impact, getting community input, getting updated cost opinions on the preferred approach, recommending a project budget, public outreach, a bond vote, and then finally beginning some school renovations. And I put this photo in just for people so that they could see kind of a little bit what's possible too. This is at the Winooski High School, was built in 1957, very similar to this school. Double loaded corridor, mid-century, and you know, you can make it look pretty nice. It doesn't actually have to be super expensive. And it really makes people feel a lot better. So that's my piece. Are there questions about the things I've talked about? I know that was a lot. I'm sorry to dump so much on you. I'm leaving you with all the documents.
So I have a couple of questions, and I'm not sure if you can answer them, but I'm looking at I just happen to have the $20 million one in front of me. So the not selected first aid security system.
Yeah.
What does that especially the 125th security system, what does that entail? What is that?
What line are you on, Lance?
11.
What are you asking? The
Yeah,
details of-
what is the 120,000 for security system? Like, what would that get us?
I only have this one.
I'll share.
That's a pretty detailed question, to be honest.
I'm just curious.
The way that this works is that we identify that the building is in need of such a thing.
Yeah.
We give what's called an outline spec to the cost estimator, and they put a cost together that represents that, but the actual details of the security system, I don't know what they would include because we haven't gotten to that. That's a level of detail that's
So,
farther down.
Some of that-
I'm gonna ask because security is pretty important.
Some of that
So-
stuff we have addressed in other ways
Right.
in the meantime.
I got you.
So, there was one private meeting. we
Yeah.
Talk about some of the stuff that we have addressed.
and I would say that this also probably includes some sort of an alarm system, which
Yeah.
we do not have.
Right.
Which in newer buildings is very common, like to alarm in and out of the building
Yeah.
every time you enter, which has its pluses and minuses. As educators that come in the evenings and weekends, it gets a lot. So what we've done without having that is we do have a full lockdown system with magnetic doors. We've got that double entry system now, which is annoying, but it provides that added security layer. So there's a lot of security buffers without putting like a full on alarm for evenings and weekends.
My
and stuff like that.
recollection is, and again, this was years ago, that in this building in particular, we were actually also adding a small room at the vestibule so that people could be credentialed before they entered
Yeah.
the main building.
And that became a law, and we have had to, we've executed right here with the two sets of doors to work around. In some of the original planning that we did, that when the bigger numbers, it also took away the entire glass wall that we have there, that goes down the side of the cafeteria. That entire glass wall was an issue when they were planning it. And so some of that stuff being set aside, leaving that wall intact, and not turning that into a security wall would be some of the savings.
Are you thinking, Sarah, that 120,000 might be cut back because of the things that we've done to date? Or we don't even would,
I mean, it wasn't put in, I think some of those pieces are addressed elsewhere, like the,
It says mag locks are in there and one of them, but we have the mag locks already in there. That's
Right.
listed as the thing that we have to get, mag locks.
right?
But we have those on
Okay.
most doors,
Should be all doors.
all doors already.
yeah, so I think it's probably a security system and that double entry having a person a lot closer, because if you are in a lot of schools here in Vermont, we're not the only one, you get pretty far into a building before you're
Yeah.
checked in. We've got videos, double videos, so that you see somebody at the exterior door on either entrance, and then also a video to see when they're in that additional lobby before they.
That's what
office
the law
lobby.
intended, the law intended to take someone and put them into a vestibule
Yes.
and have that person be a security person and a greeter.
Officer.
But it was
Right.
not necessarily, you could just be a staffer, but it was just to have a double entry to the building. But then most schools had to make a workaround because you don't have that space consideration,
Right.
it became very expensive.
So, and I think this is actually, I'm grateful for the question, and for the detailed question out of the gate, because I think it's also important to note that the way that, the way the design works, it's, and I don't mean to be trite, it's a bit of a process of discovery. And if you use the analogy of flying on a plane, you know, when you start out, you know where the destination is, generally, you start going in that direction. The wind pushes you this way and that way, and you keep contact with the air traffic controllers. And for us, the cost estimator is a little bit like the air traffic controller, right? And so we go down the road and they weigh in, and what they're doing is they're locating the airport for us, so we can get there. And eventually, when you get to the airport, you know, you circle, and you get closer and closer, and then you pick your runway, and then you actually land a plane. And each one of those different steps is like, you get a new cost estimate, and we'll keep doing that, so.
It's not so much the cost, but it's that it's in the not selected. I just want to make sure if it's part of this option that there's just a couple of ones that kind of came to question that. I was concerned about.
Right, like you would move that
It could.
over for.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah,
what my
I think like we need
Okay.
to consider
So,
selecting that, is what you're saying, right?
yeah.
And I don't know
So-
how that input is gathered. I'm gonna say right now.
I don't, so previously to this, we looked at all the things and it wasn't an easy, and this detailed estimate that you've given us makes it easier to see line by line how some things that might want to be tweaked over. And I think that just having this more detailed data and working up from dollars, which we didn't have previously, might be able to help us show people in the outreach, these are the things that we didn't select and here's why, money. And this is, we had to deprioritize, in this case, some security stuff. And should we keep that deprioritized, or have we addressed it in any other way? And this is why it's out. So this is, to have it detailed makes it a little bit easier to explain and a little bit easier to show what's like.
We could land on a 20 million plus the security.
120,000.
Right,
exactly.
It's not like a
Yeah.
strip, right?
So sort of like that one, right, so, and I had two others that I looked at was, the data network. I'd be curious, and we don't need to answer now, but at some point, I'm just curious what that entails. Is our data network just like behind, like, because
16.
16. Because if we're not keeping up with our data network, what is the data network, what does that encompass? Because if we're not keeping our, like, when I hear that, I'm hearing the high speed, I'm hearing wiring, I'm hearing.
Is it listed or not listed?
No.
It's not, this is high level.
It's under high priority.
So I would want to kind of drill, I want to.
Yeah, and that would be something I'd want Scott Marshy involved in for that.
Exactly,
Because
right.
we actually hub the server for the majority of the SU, so also. That
What this,
touches a whole different payment piece, right? Like,
it's kind of where I was.
Right.
And the last one was, line 24, HVAC, alternative geothermal. How much would we potentially save in the long run in energy by using the geothermal? That would offset some of that 1.3.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and to answer that question, we would have to do an energy model.
Right.
And it's,
Hey,
you know, it's unlikely that the savings would pay for the system, to be candid, I think. It depends on what your fuel source is, and it depends on what you think how volatile you think fossil fuels are gonna be. You know, if this school was in Franklin, Chittenden, or Addison County, you could go on natural gas and be competitive with geothermal. Out here in Northeast Kingdom, geothermal is half the cost of everything else to operate per million BTU.
Right.
So there is savings, and it is a benefit to the environment. And some aspects of the system have good longevity. But that's an energy model question, really.
what do we currently heat the building? I mean, we have wood.
since we fixed the wood chip, that's what our primary source is all year long. Like in the early fall, winter, when it's
Yeah.
weird temperatures, and the late spring, we use oil. We've got, the oil boilers were put in the summer I started, so 2019.
So the state's looking to at least residential tax, pretty heavily. If that passes, I'm sure it will probably trickle into municipal. So that kind of weighs into the model of geothermal. That's when I saw it, I was kind of like.
Yeah, we're recommending geothermal heating and cooling systems for schools because they're. There's nothing cheaper to operate and they
Right.
provide, when you do geothermal, you automatically get cooling. Which is becoming more, believe it or not, more and more of an issue in Vermont schools, especially in the early part of the.
Here right now.
Yeah, right. And, it's fun because what we say is that. It extends when you put turf on a playing field, they say it extends the playing season. And when you put true climate control in a school, it extends the learning season.
And have you also, as so objected to. A solar array,
Yeah,
is that
Yep,
expensive upfront cost?
it's actually probably zero upfront cost. I'll qualify that by saying not from us.
Yeah.
But there are multiple, contractors in Vermont, Sun Common is one, Green Lantern is another. They put a solar array on the Winooski School.
Yeah.
Sun Common did, for zero money down, and it's, in theory, capable of, taking care of 97% of their electrical needs, so. Yeah, it's definitely possible, and we would love to do that, it's because it doesn't, hit the bottom line of a project. It doesn't show up on this list, but it's something that we definitely recommend and work with folks on.
We have some solar that we get from the array that's right next
Yeah,
to the street.
right.
And we can't put it on the roof unless we.
Right.
Structurally.
We looked
Yeah,
at that.
into that.
Maybe someplace.
So. One of, more of a practical question, so, on the 45 million, option where we're adding some space, we're increasing the size of the pre-K classrooms and kindergarten classroom. I was under the impression that if we touch the walls of that building, it would essentially come crumbling down. Are we not worried, how are we gonna add, 410 square feet to those classrooms without incurring a huge amount of cost from that building being, structurally, a little questionable, I guess, to handle a renovation like.
Yeah, so I think that, part of this is that we also are planning to do another, what we've done here is we've revisited. The facility evaluation phase that we had done previously.
Yep.
We've now also revisited the visioning and programming phase. What we haven't done yet, because the leadership, the district wanted to get the public. This information first before we go down this road.
Sure.
Because we're gonna do a concept design that, it could be a shell game. The addition may not be right there. The addition may be somewhere else. The addition may be for middle school classrooms, and the elementary school classrooms will go somewhere, will go into spaces that have been vacated. I mean, I'm not exactly sure. That's just an example.
No, that's good.
Yeah, because I think it's not necessarily like adding 410 feet like to the exterior, but if you build an addition, how does the interior of the building shift around? to make it
Right,
bigger?
yeah, that's,
Yeah.
it's understandable that it'd be, that, oh, this could. We sort of know that we need to add this space, we're then gonna go and actually look at the practicality of that later.
Yeah, exactly. These are pretty crude tools in some ways,
Sure.
right? Like it's numbers on a page. It's a bit abstract. We've got line items for these scopes of work, which may or may not be subtly different, which we probably for some of them need a little bit more detail on to update the pricing. And then the program is really just says, what's the deficit?
Right,
It doesn't really say where it needs to be, it just says, okay, if you really want all of your elementary classrooms to be this, the size of other schools' elementary classrooms. You gotta add a space somewhere.
And just to clarify, Eric, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but the 45 million includes a 4.4 addition and no structural changes to any classrooms, correct?
I think there would be a little bit of work, I think that It's kind of in the noise a little bit, in terms of how much, but I think there's gonna be need to be some work on partitions in the 37 building, in order to make the rooms reasonable. It's a question of who goes in and what. I think that that's very low cost work comparatively, just because of the way the building is structured. We've got the structural needs covered for that
Okay.
building's roof. And sort of knocking down and putting up a couple of walls is pretty small potatoes in the grand scheme of things.
Okay.
And all three of these options have a sprinkler system in them, so it's,
Right.
they get coated anyway.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things that it's just a bit of painting with a broad brush, which is just how you have to handle these very early discussions, because until you have more detail and you have a design and people can count up the square footage of the walls, you're really just kind of working on budget pricing.
Right.
That's how I think of it. And it's worth noting for people also, you could drill down on any one of these numbers and probably come up with reasons why they're either too high or too low. And what we find is that that's actually always the case right up until the end. You get your last cost estimate before the project goes out to bid. And then the cost estimate overall usually is pretty good within a couple percentage points, but some things are high and some things are low. And it all kind of sugars out. And that's why we use third-party independent cost estimators, because that they make it their business to kind of know how these things work and how to budget for these things at this stage.
I saw one more question, I'm sorry. This might be a very dumb question, so I apologize ahead of time. What is a life skills classroom and why are we lacking it? I don't know.
That's a programming question for Sarah and Natalie.
Yeah, I don't know what life skills entail, sorry.
It's through Natalie, if you wanna jump in, you can, but it's through our special
Sure. Yeah,
program, go.
sorry, it's getting dark in my room here.
It's okay.
Life Skills Classroom is a spot for students who need support outside of traditional, what you would think of as like general ed programming for academics. So teaching actual life skills like how to do laundry, how to cook for yourself, basics of budgeting and money, that kind of thing, but also like hands-on things. So right now we're trying to share that in the next year with what we call our maker space or our kitchen, where we have culinary classes. So a life skills classroom is just a place where kids of all age levels could be instructed at their developmental level in different functions that are going to help them in the real world immediately and in their lives at home or in the future. So it's developmentally appropriate for little kids and older kids, really multi-age space.
Why don't we have one? Cause we don't have enough rooms in our, so, I mean, that's like truly like having it separated from what used to be like the, family consumer science room would be ideal. Like it can be its own place, probably part of like our special education classrooms and stuff like that. We just don't have enough space to be able to do it like that.
How many staff would we have to hire to do that program? Would that be like a one, or we just have the people who are already here do it?
The programs already exist.
The
interventions
programs already exist
They exist in.
in minute little spaces and
Yeah.
places and pieces because we don't have a solid space. So it doesn't shift staffing.
Right, you can think of this space needs program as our best attempt to reflect the requirement of the educational program that you already have.
Yeah.
Not assuming that there's new educational programs being added, just that we're trying to provide the adequate, minimally adequate space for the existing educational
I
programs.
think that's an important point, that if that comes up, it's not like we're expanding salaries and it's looking to just meet the existing need that we have with staff.
So the space needs cost is in which,
So it's only shows up on the high priority option, and it occurs on line 127.
And that's just one classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not one classroom, it's 8,798 square feet.
it's all of
It
the.
represents,
Yeah.
it represents
That
the
one-
deficit,
That would be a
the
huge
summary of the space needs program.
That'd be
Do a
great.
lot with
Yeah.
that. Let's go.
You know, so people just to illustrate the kind of, the appropriate. Fidelity, I use the term crude, but that may have negative connotations, but. If you look at the summary of the space needs program, and I'll actually zoom back here for folks, so that they following along online can see. The actual total net square footage that is needed is 5,865. That's the interior of classrooms and
That's the wall.
educational spaces inside the wall. What we do is we use a new build out ratio of gross to net square foot ratio of 1.5. The exhibit building, you can see on line 2 of this little mini chart is 1.37. We use 1.5 today because we have additional needs that didn't exist when these buildings were built, things like server rooms, data closets. Walls are actually thicker, believe it or not, because of the added insulation. I mean, it's so 1.5 is a target we can work towards. Some schools, international schools, it might be 1.6, 1.7. So.
And the lines 128 through 129 process solutions from 22 to 26.
Yeah, because these
Cruise up
numbers,
$10 million.
because the numbers above the list. I mean, to be candid, $10 million almost feels light. And I'm very interested to get updated cost opinion numbers, because this is the best information that we can put together today. Knowing what we know has happened and what we think will happen. But yeah, I think that may be accurate. I think it's just about doubled from 2020. Construction costs have. And about a third of, 30% of that doubling. Was 2021, 2021, and this cost estimating happened at the end of 2021. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised in the least bit. We're struggling in Vermont with higher than the national average cost escalation, because we have a significant deficit of trade contractors and very limited bidders. So professional cost estimators always qualify their estimates as being within whatever it is, 2 or 3%, assuming competitive bidding with 3 bids. And many times school projects in Vermont over the past 10 years, especially over the past 4 or 5 years, you're only getting 1 or 2 bids sometimes.
Something over on the house.
Yeah, well, it's just hard, it sounds like an anecdote, but it's hard to find plumbers and electricians.
But it fixed all people.
Big projects get more attention.
Rob's got a question.
But I have a general question, it's not as much design. Over the last, well, since each of us was here, we've had a gradual a gradual decrease in the enrollment. And probably that's projected over the next 3 the next 3 decades to be less and less also. Would that imply maybe that we don't alter the existing structure for the smaller classrooms that are undersized? And perhaps to go these with the temporary classroom approach, because then now the expense of them is still great. But if you had classes which you could include in those buildings for the next decade, which would be a stretch because they fall apart easier. But that is a general question for the district.
That's more for us question. We have some data from NESDEC where we've looked into trying to figure out some sort of estimation for, enrollment going forward.
Yeah,
And so their numbers, they gradually decline over the years, slight according to their calculations, and as best as we can estimate that might happen. And we talked about the temporary buildings in here, and I don't know that temporary buildings were what we landed on in terms of, the best idea going forward, because they don't last. Like you
Yeah.
say, and we're not.
and that's a big problem.
It's a big problem. So in that case, you might be better off just not saying, let's not build new, let's not add,
Yeah.
the temporary buildings. Let's then focus on the thing that can just shore up what we have. Try to deal with the space. That might be the $20 million option, might make a better sense in that case. If you're
Sure.
concerned about decreased enrollment,
Yeah,
you might end up not landing all the way on adding the extra spaces.
And I think too, our decreased enrollment is slight, it's not like. It's not a sharp
it is a
decline
big dip. Yeah.
by any stretch of the means. I also think. Natalie specifically is working really hard on recruiting tuition students, because that has been a big part of our decline. The last 3 or 4 years. What's not declining is our elementary numbers, and that's who the classrooms aren't fitting right now. And so we've got. For example, we've got 2 teachers leaving in the elementary. And we have to shift one of them to the 5th and 6th grade because the classrooms aren't big enough for the size of the classes. Whereas if the classrooms were bigger, we might be able to finagle things a little differently, but I can't.
I think also it's, well, go ahead.
Well, I had a question, not quite along the enrollment issue, but on these different options here, if the 10 million, how much time does that buy you until the next major renovation or addition or whatever is required? And then the 20 million, how much time does that buy you before you have to look at this all?
The next part of our meeting will be, the superintendent's gonna give us a presentation, about some of the cost estimates. And one of the things that we discussed in the smaller group meeting was the fact that $10 million does not solve enough of the problems that you can plan for not needing something very, very soon, even
So-
within that 10 years.
So realistically, you shouldn't even look at the 10 million maybe.
The group, you have to look at it because it's the least, we think this is the least we could possibly do. And
Yeah, I
so
know, but if you say, all right, in 5 years, we gotta do another 20 million, I mean.
I think you just have to have
You have
people
to-
brace for it. So you have to sort of, what we're looking at, what he'll present in a few minutes more is if we do the $20 million option, or the $40 million option, we can extend the bond and go a little further. If we do the $10 million option, we need to keep it tight so that if we have to stack a second bond on top of it, do some other work, we have to be ready for that. As opposed to committing to a long-term loan. So the cost may end up being very similar. The shorter term of the loan might benefit us, but like you're saying, it's, this is a friendly room, so it's easy to say it.
Mhm.
It's easy to say that maybe $10 million won't cut it and we should all look at the $20 million room. But when we get into the places where people are frothing, it's gonna be a lot more difficult to say that and have it stick.
Well, Kim, you said that too in the
Yeah.
smallest group meeting about making sure the community knows that these problems just don't go away. Like with a 10 million project, we're not just saying, oh, these are no longer issues. You have to, we have to present this like staged incremental approach so they know these costs might get more as we push them off too.
Yeah, okay, for instance, the roofs are in the $20 million option right now. I mean, my professional opinion is get them fixed as soon as you can. Don't wait 5 years, don't wait 10 years.
The roof's
They-
rather major.
And so these options they're a little bit of an academic exercise. To sort of game out, what does it mean to only spend 10 million? That's really what it is. What does it mean to only spend $10 million?
Yeah, I think that's what Clayton was bringing up, that people who aren't aware of any of this information to present it to them. Like, what could you have done for 10 million? You know, was this and the 20 million, is that you? I think because we went through before that we presented an 80 million, everybody went, whoa, like
Yeah.
that.
The 80 million was such a big number, they forgot about the 65. They
Yeah,
forgot about
right.
the 65 that we presented, that was also a big number. That
Yeah.
was also a big number, but
Yeah.
they're still mad about the 80.
I think there's a certain amount of, this is all, so this happens to me a lot. you know, for folks, we're working with, I don't know. 10 or more districts, and we're working in Manchester, Vermont, Milton. Addison Central, we just did a master planning project in Montpelier. You know, and if you just Google some of the results from some of those other studies, you'll find that every single community is dealing with the same problem. Something that's interesting to me is that when these buildings were built, people had a real appetite for these projects, you know. There was a school here, they built the school in 37, then they tore down the wood building, it was in the initial image. They built a school in the 50s, then they added to it in the 60s, then they added to it in the 80s, and we haven't really done anything.
growing.
Right, so, right, growing.
We're
And
stage shrinking now.
the thing that's really tricky is that the buildings wear out.
Yeah.
And the majority of the hard infrastructure, anything that's made out of copper or cast iron, which is your piping, your cabling. That has a 50 or so year shelf life, you know, we're working with Olean Central up the road, and this is not to fearmonger, I'm trying to really just be honest about what happens. We're working with them, we did a facility evaluation of their entire district. You know, it's bad news, it's very similar, long list for every building. And we were presenting to the community and someone asked this question, well, what if we don't do this? And they were asking, I think under slab piping was one of the items. And he said, well, you know, the stuff does wear out and you will have increasing frequency of failures. And literally the next week, they had a pipe burst, flooded their first floor of the Orleans Elementary School. Now they were out of the building for weeks. I don't know if they're gonna get back in this year, or maybe they did, but it was a big crisis. They had sinkhole in the basement, foundation issues. You know, and this is the reality of everybody who owns a home knows that it comes time, you gotta replace stuff, or it's gonna cost you more money down the road. And because we have to get agreement, but you know, 50+1% of people, it's just very hard to get agreement on this kind of scale of investment, but it just doesn't go away. It just, you end up paying more over time because it's like death by 1,000 cuts.
I had just one other kind of question, and I brought it up before. My question has been the original, the two oldest, and I guess is it the 59? I keep hearing that there's
57 is
structural.
57,
57, yes,
57 is how I
57.
remember it.
Or 50
But the block. or-
The cinder blocks are 57.
Yes,
But
57,
my
yes.
question is how much money are we putting into those two or older, or any of the older? You're still ending up with an old building. Is it in the long run less expensive to take those right down completely and do new construction?
That was the $80 million, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think that
I realize
it's probably not cheaper, so when we looked at this.
I mean, in the long run, because you're still talking with an old building, and you're gonna have presumably, you know, more maintenance.
If all that matters is the dollars and the cents. Then even with structural issues, it's probably cheaper by the numbers to renovate. There are other benefits which are not monetary to building new. And that is a concept that is hard to communicate when the numbers are this big and people are already this stressed out about the property taxes. That's the struggle. I think that, you know, an example is when we did this exploration for the town of Milton, they wanted to renovate their elementary middle school. We did the analysis, we looked at it. It ended up just being 6% more to build new, 6%. So it's 106% of the cost of renovation to get a brand new building. They really wanted to do it, but it was $180 million, so they couldn't swallow that pill.
45.
So, you know, well, that's a school for 1,200 kids, K through 8.
Sure.
So, you know, and that's, but this is, and I'm agnostic on this. We've done renovated schools. I think they're beautiful. New buildings, they're wonderful, they're purpose built. Some might argue that they're a little bit better because we just think differently now about things like access to daylight. You know, this building's always gonna have, always gonna. I didn't plan that comment that way. This is what I'm talking about.
Well, I think that's very important what you bring up, because this, the whole footprint, the school altogether, the question is what redeeming factors does it have? And there's a lot of interior space. You talk about the kids being able to perform well, their environment matters. And I can't imagine being in this room all day long, or the majority of the day. I mean, I'm getting sick of being in here now. But you think about the kids, that's what our main purpose is, and I keep coming back. Well, I think I'm deviating, I shouldn't deviate, but
We will certainly benchmark the current program and concept design. I mean, pretty much when we get a concept design on a project, a complex project like this that involves renovations in addition. I mean, if this group today says it's a waste of everybody's time for you to try and design an addition for this 8,800 square feet or whatever, if the people in this room or online collectively say, don't even bother. We're gonna try for $20 million. Then fine, we won't. But if we go down the road of doing a concept design that includes additions, that includes all these renovations, then we would benchmark it using comparable data against what a new school would cost, just because we would want to know, and we would want you to have that information, not because we think it's a serious proposal that has legs. So you'll have that information at some point if you want it.
Katie had a question a while ago too.
Oh,
yeah.
mine was just about the enrollment thing, so a little off track now, but have you guys ever considered, this is for Sarah specifically, I guess, putting elementary students in this hallway? Because I'm just like sitting in this classroom right now and it's way bigger than my kids' elementary classroom. I get that there's no windows, so that's not great, but I know the ones on that, I do have windows. Has that ever been, because the high school classes maybe are smaller now than the elementary classes?
Yes and no, it all depends on the class and what's
Yeah.
being taught. We couldn't do an entire flip.
Hmm.
I don't think it's a great idea to have second graders. We both, I have my own, you have one. Over here, going to the bathroom with the high schoolers and
Well,
stuff.
that's
We
why I mean,
can't,
if they
there's
totally flipped.
there's not enough classrooms, so.
Okay, because like, no, I don't want the second graders going bathroom with high schoolers, but high schoolers could go
There's not
over there.
enough because you couldn't move the science labs
Hmm.
with what we have and stuff like that. It would be a possibility, but
If you
not
remodel.
without, yes.
Okay.
It would be a possibility with a remodel,
Yeah.
with some
It
of the big
actually feels
pieces.
like, thinking about other elementary schools that I've been in, this hallway feels like more of an elementary
Yeah.
hallway, because it's just one hallway, and like, as of now, our elementary classrooms are like here, all over the place, they're not in one hallway. If it was possible to have like K through 5
Yes.
in one hallway, that would be ideal.
This is the only classroom, there's like,
It's easy to say in this classroom, if we all went next door, you would not be saying.
well, those
I've
are,
been
those
in all
are
these
inter,
classes.
but they're
I know that one's
those are
right.
intervention spaces and stuff
Yeah.
that could work. I
Right.
wouldn't make this an elementary classroom where kids are here all day
There's no
long,
windows.
because there's no
But
windows.
there are many other classrooms at the other end of the hallway that are big
Yeah.
and nice. and
All of them have windows, yeah.
It's one of the reasons it works for high school, because they're itinerant. you know?
Right.
Right.
It's just
it's
their
the-
desk is on
But
the
this
Yeah,
is the
ground.
only classroom, there's the whole other half of the hallway, it's
Right.
quite nice.
We talked about that, Cam, too, and I guess I don't know, is that a crazy idea, that renovation of a flip? Will we be way over any of these proposals in terms of cost with renovating this area for elementary and then the 37 for high school? Because that came up in our small work group too. I mean, you obviously don't have the numbers in front of you for that, but do you envision that being a lot more money to renovate to fit elementary over here?
As I look down through the high priority options, I see that it includes, basically an all new power network, a complete lighting system, all the security and access controls, data networks, pretty much all the mechanical stuff you need to deal with, all the restrooms in the whole facility. We're leaving a lot of cracked block, which is aesthetic. in nature. It's not, if it's not an eminent danger, then it would be addressed separately through a maintenance program. We're including all the windows, we're including, insulating exterior walls that are uninsulated, we'd be including upgrading science room, millwork. Also doing all the flooring in the whole school. And also dealing with sort of auditorium seating and some of the lifts. And so, you know, if it's not like, and that's nearly a gut renovation.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about, and we've included painting the whole facility.
Yeah.
So at the point that you're painting every surface, you're replacing the ceilings and lighting, you're replacing all the flooring, you're doing all the guts, all the piping, the power. It doesn't matter whether this is an elementary or a middle school or a high school classroom here. It's gonna cost the same, pretty much, you know what I mean, because you've got the same mix of needs in the same ratios, it's just in a different location.
And if we needed to add, say, a bathroom, and if we take out that 4.4 million for the additional space, and we use some of that, I don't think we would need 4.4 million to renovate this to be elementary. But if we needed to add a bathroom, say, over here in a classroom. That wouldn't cost 4.4 million, do you know what I'm saying? So
No,
like,
of course it would.
yeah,
You don't have, but the space doesn't, right now, I think that one of the things that I'm hearing is people are wondering whether can you make do without any addition?
right.
That's kind of,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and, maybe that descends from Rob's question about temporary classrooms. But I think right now, you truly don't have enough space, like.
Yeah.
That's a today problem, and sort of kind of what I was getting at with the whole, discussion about like, people seem to have more of a tolerance for, projects that came quickly, is that like, if you invested this money in these spaces to get these elementary kids, because right now the bubble is in elementary, right? You're gonna serve those students, you know, that bubble stays through, and maybe there's some reorganization in 10 years, but you really. I mean, the kids who are in elementary now are gonna be here for another 10+ years, and so you really need the space now, you need it for like a decade. It almost doesn't, to me, it doesn't really make sense to not do it for another 10 years, then you really might not need it. But in the meantime, you've got 10 years of students who are really in challenging situations.
That just made me wonder if it would be like on a faster track to like flop and remodel than it is to like build a whole nother addition for the elementary students, because the ones that are in elementary school right now are not actually, the 5th graders are not gonna be helped by whatever we decide on. They're
Right.
gonna be out of elementary school by the time it is
Mhm.
built.
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe the bubble group, if we flip, the bubble group is over here, and then things even out eventually as
Who knows?
enrollment.
Well, but there's big bubble groups coming up, which is why we have only 4-year-old preschool and have for several years.
There's also the challenge of how do you renovate the space while it's in use, because the school has to continue operating.
Yeah.
And building new space, you know, if you build an addition and it's got 3 or 4 or 5 classrooms in it. Now you have some place to move some kids to, for instance. All right, so you can vacate a portion of the building. You build the new space first. You move into it to vacate an area of the building. That area of the building gets renovated. Then you move out of another part of the building into the newly renovated zone, and you renovate that part of the building, and you work your way around, and that's one of the things that drives the cost of these renovations up, and why it's.
But if you had a relocatable classroom, you
Well,
could put them in that.
and you may need.
And you
may
can
need that
move them
anyway.
around to different schools.
You may, and in fact, you may still need,
That's what we did up there.
you know, the addition may not be big enough to effectively do the shell game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the contractor who would probably be, if you hired a construction manager, they would do some work on phasing. And they may come back and say, listen, we can trim a year off of this project by getting 2 modular units.
Right.
Which probably almost pays for itself. The rental cost on the modular units, probably less than a year of general conditions for the contractor, you know, so. So you may need both, and if you don't build an addition, then you probably need a host of mobile units. Or you need to like rent a motel or something, crazy, which has, I think they did that in Eden.
Sure, for space.
Yeah, I've got a general financial question. And it's on the amortization, if you went with the whole shebang here. And it was stretched out over a long time. Would the annual expense be about equal if you went with each of these other ones that are smaller? And then
So this leads me into changing the subject, because the next part of our agenda is going to be the superintendent has some tax impact information.
okay, there we go.
Wow.
To the core.
And,
So should I stop sharing?
Yes.
well, please stop
He's on
sharing.
the
So
Zoom if you just wanna.
he's on the Zoom, so he should.
Oh, you can just, then
he
you
should
can
put it up.
just stay
So Mark,
connected if
I-
you're staying here.
I'm gonna work my way around to you. We asked, this is one thing we didn't have when we got to this point last time was the
Yeah.
tax impact. So everything is ready with the tax impact because Mike did it previously. And so Mark has some data for us that's also gonna be made public tonight, in addition to these things. And so in this room, we're gonna take a look at what some of the cost things are and what some of the situations, just like you're describing, how does it make sense to appropriate this money? If we can get, Mark.
Okay, Sarah, would you make sure I'm a co-host?
Yeah,
Good share.
Clayton's doing that right now.
I'm super good at it too. So this is gonna go.
So,
really-
okay, so before I start putting anything up, so these are ballparks, okay? And when you do a ballpark, you have to make a number of assumptions. Okay, so I got a little bowl on my desk that you can't see and it's full of assumptions. I'm gonna share them with you, okay? First of all, we don't know what interest rates are going to be like even a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So Mike went to the bond bank, found out if everything that you're gonna see is assuming that we did this today, okay? So today's interest rates, the yield rate in the for the FY25 budget, the current CLA, et cetera, et cetera. All those things are variables that will change. Some they'll go up or they'll go down. Okay. Second thing is I'm not going to show you a live model, so somebody's going to be tempted to say, well, what happens if we do assume a longer period or a shorter period? I can answer that in a general sense, but I can't model it for you. Okay, so we made some assumptions in putting this together. And I'm going to start with, for no particular reason, I'm going to start with the 10-year. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's
All
something circulating, you'll get these in your email and these are gonna be public after tonight, so I'll email them to you later. And this information exists, so.
Okay. So, first of all, for all of these, there's different terms that you could borrow the money for. The one that you're seeing highlighted in gray is the one that, that's what we're using to figure out residential tax rate impact and property tax impact, okay? So if you did the $10 million option, Mike and I talked about this quite a bit. You would probably, you never borrow all of the money all at once. You borrow it as you need it, okay? But if you did the $10 million option, basically what you're looking at is about in the first year, this is 25-26, a 6-cent increase or a 6-cent tax rate impact over and above everything else in the spending. Okay. And for the property tax impact on a $100,000 house site is $60. That's on a spend or a borrow of $0.3 million. And then you bring in the rest of the money in the second year, and now you're looking at 26 cents or a $260 increase per 100,000. And these are straight, these numbers don't consider income sensitivity or any of that. This is a straight homestead tax rate, okay? These numbers will go up or down depending on what the CLA is at the time, what the yield rate is at the time. I don't have any way of modeling that. Okay, does that make sense?
I would just add so essentially this is just that in gray there, that's the number that's being added to our budget. Sort of.
That's money that, well, yeah, I wouldn't say it that way. It's essentially, I would say that you're gonna have to add those expenses somewhere in the budget, and the impact of just those expenses alone are, 6 cents in the first year, 26 cents when you get into, subsequent years. So this only runs it out for 1 year. But you wouldn't spend all the money, and you wouldn't have to pay all the money back in the first year, but then from July 26 on, for the next 9 years, that year and the next 8 years following, you're gonna see a 26 cent rate tacked on top of your regular tax rate.
So the 1.1 million, is the payments on that loan for the 10 years.
This is 10, we said 10 years on at that dollar amount, well, you know what happens, if you spread it out, you could spread it out over 15 years or 30 years, but you're gonna end up paying a lot more in interest costs over the term of that loan.
And this goes to Mary's question as well, is how soon again are you gonna need to tap? And we haven't tapped since 1999, so we can't anticipate that this seniors are gonna buy as much time, given all that we know now. So that's why we're looking at 10 years here and not extending the $10 million option out for longer.
But whoever made the comment that the numbers up above are the projections, if you spread it out over 15 or 30 years, that's correct. But this is the yin and the yang of this is, do you want to be paying off that $10 million over 30 years when by that time you've already had to go and invest in something else? Either new renovations, additional space, maybe even a new building potentially. So we picked a shorter term for this $10 million. Okay, can I move on?
Yes, sir.
You get the concept. This is the $20 million renovation. And this is again, borrow a small debt service in the first year of about $0.3 million, $300,000. And then in the subsequent 19 years following, the debt service is about 1.1 million per year. And the impact of that this is on a 15-year basis, not a 30-year basis. So the residential tax impact of that when you get into your second and subsequent years is 37 cents on top of the rest of the tax rate that comes from regular school spending. Okay. And on the 45 million, it goes up kind of almost exponentially here. If you look at this, for the $45 million option, we're thinking that that's something that you would probably stretch out over the 30-year period and not try to do it in 15, 20 years. There are increments in between. We could have modeled, what if it's 15? What if it's 20? What if it's 25? We didn't do that. Okay, we're just trying to get you a ballpark sense of what we're looking at for tax impact on these projects.
So where we are now with these is we're gonna have an idea as we go forward chewing and trying to get some more public input on this and trying to see what we think as a group. What the tax impact will be, but delving too deeply into it, obviously, we're gonna come up against walls based on what we choose, what we think makes the most sense. And so this is just to give you an idea, minus income sensitivity, of where we are right now in terms of the cost. The $10 million plan doesn't make sense to spread out very long. The $20 million plan, which the $10 million plan is almost the bare minimum. The $20 million plan shores up this building for a number of years, hopefully still leaving some things off that we have listed. And the $45 million plan might set us up okay for 30 years.
I think we do have to look at the income sensitivity portion, because when we did that model to show what the impact of the some number of people.
So we don't have 3 separate plans to work with yet, so we don't have a number yet to work off of. So we can, we can look at some of this to a degree, but it's all gonna be estimated. And so for right now, I think that's something that we can do without Cam in the room, and as we continue on without having to keep this up. That's something that we can look for in the coming days, if we start to winnow down the things that we're looking at. Like Mary said, does it make sense to do a $10 million plan? Because if that's all that makes sense to ask, then we don't need to see the tax impact of 45 million on everybody. Because if we say, this is what we think we can get the town to agree to, and this is where we are gonna be right now with this, What do we think we can get the town to agree to support our students in the building? And what makes the most sense to us?
Kim, maybe you know some of this, maybe you don't. Are there any other funding sources that we should be looking at? That's not just a bond?
No.
Design?
Not at present.
Yeah, there are nothing significant. I mean, the USDA offers, rural development loans, which can be lower interest rate than than a bond. You know, it's federal money, it comes with some red tape. That's actually how the Winooski School funded their project, was through the USDA loan, but it's very much the same. And it's not gonna be, it's not gonna make a dramatic difference. It may barely move the needle in terms of, what you're seeing here. And I don't know what those interest rates are. And there are very, very, very modest grants available through programs like, through Efficiency Vermont. And, you know, you're not on Vermont Gas, so there's no program there, so.
I mean, we could do a capital, once we have it set, we could do a capital campaign to reduce the cost. Maybe there's somebody out there who really wants to invest in a rural school.
Sure.
You know, you never know.
Angel.
Yeah, but you have all sorts of strings attached to that,
Right.
because
Yeah,
unless they give anonymously, because
right,
they are gonna want, look at what I've done.
yeah.
Alright, so
I'll put their name on somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but here you go.
You're gonna build a new school, your name's gonna be right over that door.
Well, I think they'd like a little nice looking facility, that sort of thing.
And I think it's worth noting, I mean, I'll just say this, and it's just, and this is not to get everyone's hopes up, I think it's. Fool's errand to get excited about this too much, but the state is investigating a construction aid program. They have passed H 847, I think. It's the one I
8%.
It's the one I sent you the details on, that has been passed into law. And that's going to set up another study committee. To take the next look at, setting up a program for state, funding aid to Vermont schools. They're rewriting the standards. And there's a possibility of a grant program for master planning, and it's unclear whether that's gonna be retroactive or not. So that's all to say that the state is they're trying to start setting up the guardrails for how schools will be into that program. And if you read the language of H 847, you get some sense of what those things are. Like, schools have to have a master plan, which you folks will have most of the pieces of it, not all the pieces of, in order to finish your master plan. And some other things too. Your buildings need to be, I think, below a certain FCI, facility condition index.
65%,
Something
or
like that.
65.
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what Danville is.
So that in and of itself, if I recall, Danville was higher than that. That may necessitate, the only way to lower your FCI is to invest in the building. To actually fix things, because if you fix things, you improve the FCI. For folks who are not familiar, I don't need to use jargon and leave it that, stands for Facilities Condition Index. Put simply, it's the cost of repairs over the cost of replacement. So if you have $500,000 of repairs that are needed to your building, and it would cost you $1 million to replace it, the building's FCI is 50. If you have $1 million worth of repairs needed and you do $100,000 worth of those repairs, now your FCI is 40. So the only way to drive your FCI down is to repair the building and invest money in it, which Danville may, I don't know this because I haven't crunched the numbers recently, but we'll be able to benchmark this as well. May need to invest in the building in order to qualify for a state program for construction aid. So in order to get money, you may need to spend money. So and I don't know where all this is going. All this is just to say that the state is working on this. They've also, these have been in conversations for years. And we're still in the kind of study committee phase, so it's unclear how long that's going to take or what the results will be.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop us now. Mark, yes, Mark's gonna go. That's the first one. He's the first one gonna exit. We're gonna plan some more meetings now because we're gonna get to the point where Cam is telling us things that we're gonna find out as we progress. I appreciate it, Cam. And but in respect of everybody's time at 7:30, a lot of what we were doing here to make this, was making this information public, sharing it amongst ourselves in the friendly room, in the people that understand where we are, and certainly we're all gonna have to get a grip on what we think we need to do and what we think we need to present to everybody. And we need to schedule some meetings, because this is the only one we have on the schedule for right now. So I have questions about meeting scheduling, and then I gotta try to let now.
Should I stick around?
You, sir, are dismissed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pam.
Send me the digital presentation so I can link it in the minutes,
I sure can.
and I'll put it on our website.
Kind of just a PDF.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, ideally.
All right, folks, thank you for having me.
I think it's
Thank you.
Mark's
Thank you,
and
sir.
Mark too.
Yeah.
I'll send all the documents that.
So Mark's,
were
we'll get Mark to send his documents that are PDFs as well. They'll go in the meeting minutes and then the newspaper will get them, and then we'll get a lot of people that are next week.
I'll send all 4 PDFs of the spreadsheets and a PDF of the presentation to Clayton, and I bid you all in the post office.
Thank you.
Okay. And I'm letting that.
You back on?
I don't know.
You got booted out.
I don't know how to do anything.
There was a bunch of chats already.
Yeah, we got them all.
It was just Natalie saying the things we were talking
Yeah.
about, but I was like,
I got this.
everybody can't see this.
You can have
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. I gave mine away.
But Yeah.
One of the things that.
Yeah.
All right, so meeting planning, folks. Do you guys, it's probably gonna start to be prudent to be meeting more often again, because now we're in an action stage. Can you meet next month on the third Thursday? Is anybody in town on the third Thursday? I don't- Let's look at it.
Yes, I can do that.
What date is it?
The 18th,
18th.
I cannot.
Okay, what about the 11th?
Yes.
yes.
11th? 11th? 11th. Let us set up the next meeting for the 11th and have one on the schedule, and then there'll be a board meeting on July the 2nd.
We can't meet in here. In this room.
No, wherever we can meet, the building committee, wherever we can meet in this building.
Yes.
So we'll find a place
Where?
in this building. And you can move, I can move the meeting based on how it's scheduled, but, so the 11th, 6 o'clock, if not in this room, when you get your agenda, it'll have the room that we're in. And if I don't see you here, I'll find you somewhere wandering the halls, but it'll be construction. So 6 o'clock on July the 11th.
Yeah.
We'll probably talk about this at the meeting on July the 2nd. This will probably come up, and there'll probably be some people with some questions, and so it'll be on the agenda to talk about specifically the costs, I would think, more than anything else, more than the planning. And so 7-2, if you're around, a new superintendent, new rules about a superintendent, that's a whole new ballgame, assistant superintendent as well, so new people that have to be caught up. And then we'll be in communication with the architects. This is the last time we're gonna see them. We're gonna be sending them information. And then 7-11, we're gonna start figuring out what we think.
I got a quick question.
Yes,
Do we
ma'am.
really have an idea, like if we go on the 10 million, how much time that buys us before we have to go?
We don't
another
really have an idea, but it doesn't, we'll,
10 years, do you think? I mean, I don't know
I-
the systems that are
so,
being done.
let me adjourn the meeting. And
Oh, sorry.
adjourn the meeting, stop the recording and answer that
Yeah,
question,
okay.
so that I'm not answering it on the record.
Oh, okay.
So meeting adjourned, recording
We're
stop.
not scheduling a second meeting?
I'm gonna schedule one meeting for now, and then we're gonna go with that.